In the harsh winter of the Old West, a single mother was cast out by her in-laws, clutching her newborn with nowhere to go. Just as all hope seemed lost, a quiet cowboy appeared, not only offering shelter, but a second chance at life. This is a heartfelt story of compassion, redemption, and a family reborn. If this story moves you, please like, share, leave a thankful comment, and subscribe to the channel. Don't look away. The most touching moment awaits at the end.
In the sun-weathered heart of Wyoming, Sarah Kendrick never expected to find herself starting over at 53. Once a respected horse trainer, now wheelchair-bound after a devastating barn accident, she watches helplessly as her wealthy in-laws strip away everything she and her late husband built together. With 2 teenage sons to feed and nowhere else to turn, she retreats to the only thing they couldn't take, a small, run-down family cabin on the outskirts of town. But fate has a way of writing unexpected chapters. When Marcus Coleman, a seasoned rancher with weathered hands and kind eyes, discovers her predicament, he sees beyond her wheelchair to the skilled horsewoman within. His offer seems almost too good to be true, a chance to manage his prestigious stables, complete with adaptive equipment and a fresh start. Could this chance encounter reshape not just her future, but her heart as well? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's weathered fingers trace the edge of the family photo album, dust rising from its leather-bound cover like memories awakening from a long slumber. The photograph that caught her eye showed a younger version of herself, standing proud beside a chestnut mare at the Wyoming State Fair. Her late husband, Thomas, beamed at her side, their boys, then just 10 and 8, clutching blue ribbons with gap-toothed grins. That was before everything changed, before the accident that stole both her mobility and her beloved Thomas within the span of 18 cruel months. "Mom!" Michael's voice, deeper now at 17, pulled her from her reverie. He stood in the cabin's doorway, his father's jawline and quiet strength evident in his bearing. "James is having trouble with that old generator again." Sarah set aside the album, her hands automatically moving to the wheels of her chair. "Tell him to hold on. There's a trick to it, something your father taught me years ago." The cabin, though humble, held echoes of better days. Sarah had insisted on keeping it, even when Thomas's family urged them to sell. A backup plan, she'd always said, though Thomas would laugh and ask what they'd ever need backing up from. The irony wasn't lost on her now. Through the window, she watched 15-year-old James wrestling with the generator. He had his father's mechanical mind, but lacked the patience. Like Thomas, he preferred working with horses to machines. Both boys had inherited their parents' affinity for the animals, though they expressed it differently. Michael approached horsemanship with analytical precision, already talking about veterinary school. James had the intuitive touch, able to calm even the most spirited stallion with just his presence. The memories of building their horse-training business felt like scenes from another life. She and Thomas had started with just 2 horses and a dream, gradually earning a reputation that drew clients from 3 states over. The Kendrick name meant something in Wyoming's horse circles, or it used to. "The primer's stuck again," James called out as Sarah wheeled onto the porch. "Dad always said, treat it gentle like a nervous colt." They finished together, sharing a bittersweet smile. The familiar ache squeezed Sarah's heart. She missed Thomas most in these moments, when their shared wisdom echoed through their children. He should be here, teaching them, watching them grow into the fine young men they were becoming. Instead, she had to weather the disapproving looks from his family, the whispered concerns about her ability to raise 2 teenage boys from a wheelchair. Thomas's parents, the esteemed Kendricks of Bitter Creek Ranch, had made their position clear: sell the business, accept their generous offer to buy out her share, and let them take charge of the boys' future. "Never," she'd told them, the same steel in her voice that had once commanded respected from the most challenging clients. "These are my sons. and this is our life. But that was before the medical bills mounted, before the regular clients began, drifting away, their eyes never quite meeting hers as they made their excuses. Before she realized that reputation and respect in the horse world were as fragile as the human body itself, the generator sputtered to life under James's hands, his whoop of triumph carrying across the yard. Sarah smiled, remembering similar victories in the training ring, the pride in mastering a new skill. "You did good, sweetheart," she called out, then turned to Michael. "Your brother may not want to hear it, but he's more like your father every day." Michael leaned against the porch railing, his eyes wise beyond his years. "So were you, Mom. Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew." "He was right." Sarah blinked back tears, touched by the quiet certainty in her eldest's voice. Thomas had indeed called her strong, but lately she'd begun to wonder. Strength seemed a hollow word when faced with empty bank accounts and uncertain futures. Yet looking at her boys, Thomas's legacy written in their determination, their kindness, their unwavering faith in her, Sarah felt something stir beneath the weight of her grief and worry. They were Kendricks, after all, and Kendricks didn't break, no matter how hard the fall. Thomas's weathered Stetson still hung by the cabin door, its shape holding the memory of his daily rituals. Sarah often caught Michael studying it when he thought no one was looking, his fingers ghosting over the brim, just as his father's had done countless times before heading out to the stables. The accident replayed in her mind with cruel clarity. A spooked horse, a split-second decision, the sickening crack as the stall door splintered beneath her. She'd known the moment she hit the ground that something was terribly wrong. The paralysis started at her hips, a creeping numbness that would become her constant companion. Thomas had been her rock during those first devastating months. "We'll adapt," he'd promised, his voice steady even as medical bills mounted and clients quietly took their business elsewhere. He'd spent every spare moment modifying their home, researching equipment that would let her continue working with horses. His parents had even seemed supportive initially, offering to help finance the necessary changes to their facility. Then came the heart attack. Swift and merciless, it took Thomas one ordinary Tuesday morning, leaving Sarah to face his family's true colors alone. "The business can't survive with you." Her mother-in-law's words had trailed off, elegant hands gesturing vaguely toward the wheelchair. "Thomas would have wanted the boys to have every advantage. We can provide that." The boys had heard it all from their bedroom upstairs, the thinly veiled suggestions that Sarah was now unfit, the generous offer to buy her out that amounted to a fraction of the business's worth, the implied threat of legal action if she refused. James had erupted first, his father's temper flaring. "You can't do this! This is our home!" But they could, and they did. The legal paperwork arrived within days, revealing how thoroughly Thomas's parents had prepared for this moment. Their son's death had given them the leverage they needed to claim controlling interest in the business he and Sarah had built together. Sarah wheeled herself to the window, watching her sons work in the cabin's small yard. Michael split wood with methodical precision, while James tinkered with their ancient truck. They'd adapted to their reduced circumstances with a resilience that made her heart ache with pride and guilt. The community's reaction had been the hardest pill to swallow. People who'd known them for years suddenly became distant, influenced by the Kendricks' subtle campaign of doubt. Did they really want to trust their precious horses to a woman who couldn't even stand? Wouldn't it be better for everyone if she just accepted her in-laws' offer? "Your father would be proud of you both," Sarah said later that evening as they sat down to a simple dinner. She'd learned to cook from her wheelchair, though some days the effort left her exhausted. He believed in standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Michael looked up from his plate, his expression serious. Dad also believed in adapting. Remember what he used to say about working with difficult horses? "Sometimes you have to find a new way to the same destination," James quoted, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Thomas's old sayings had become their family scripture, offering guidance even in his absence. His hat by the door was more than just a memento. It was a reminder of the principles he'd lived by, the legacy he'd left them to uphold. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the Wyoming wind whistle through the cabin's weathered walls, Sarah allowed herself a moment of uncertainty. They'd lost so much, their home, their business, their place in the community. Yet something in her refused to be broken. Thomas had seen that strength in her from the beginning, had believed in it until the end. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, she held on to that faith. They were still standing, still together, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough of a foundation to build upon. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, just like Thomas's death had. Sarah stared at the official letterhead, her hands trembling slightly as she read the cold legal language demanding they vacate the property within 30 days. Her in-laws hadn't even had the decency to warn her. This was their answer to her latest refusal to accept their buyout offer. 30 days, she whispered to the empty kitchen. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching dust motes in its beam, illuminating the worn linoleum floor she and Thomas had always meant to replace. Now it would be someone else's problem. The sound of the school bus pulling away snapped her from her daze. She couldn't let the boys come home to this news unprepared. Gathering her resolve, Sarah wheeled herself to the old truck, determined to meet them in town after school. They deserved to hear this over hot chocolate at May's diner, not in the shadow of impending loss. May's hadn't changed in 20 years. Same. Cracked leather booths, same coffee-stained menus, same smell of apple pie and bacon grease. Sarah positioned her wheelchair at their usual table, ordering 3 hot chocolates out of habit, though her appetite had vanished. "Mind if I join you?" The voice was unfamiliar, deep, weathered by years and wind. Sarah looked up to find a tall man in his late 50s, standing beside her table, his eyes the clear blue of a Wyoming summer sky. His clothes were worn but well kept, marking him as a working rancher rather than a gentleman farmer. "I'm actually waiting for my sons," she began, but he was already settling into the booth opposite her. "Marcus Coleman," he introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. "And you're Sarah Kendrick. I've heard about your work with quarter horses." Sarah fought the urge to laugh bitterly. That was a lifetime ago. 8 months is hardly a lifetime, he countered, surprising her. "Word travels in our circles. Your ghost dancer program for troubled horses was revolutionary. Shame about the accident." There was something in his tone. Not pity, but genuine respect that made Sarah study him more carefully. "You're not from around here. My ranch is up near Jackson, but I'm looking to expand operations this way." He paused as May herself brought over the hot chocolates. 3 cups? Expecting company?" "My boys." Sarah glanced at the clock. "They'll be here soon." Marcus nodded, his eyes taking in the wheelchair, then moving past it to study her face. "I heard what the Kendricks are doing. Small towns and their gossip, blessing and curse, isn't it?" Before Sarah could respond, the diner's bell chimed. Michael and James burst in, their faces falling as they spotted the stranger at their table. But they approached with the politeness Thomas had instilled in them, introducing themselves with firm handshakes. "Sir," Michael said, sliding in beside his mother while James took the outer seat. "You're sitting at our table." There was a protective edge to his voice that made Sarah's heart swell even as she prepared to chide him. But Marcus just smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "So I am. And I hear you boys know your way around horses almost as well as your mother." James straightened, pride warring with suspicion. "Mom taught us everything we know." "Everything your father didn't teach you first," Sarah corrected softly, then drew a deep breath. "Boys, there's something we need to discuss." She pulled the eviction notice from her bag, laying it on the table between their untouched hot chocolates. Michael read it first, his jaw tightening in a way that made him look painfully like Thomas. James's reaction was more vocal, a sharp intake of breath followed by a curse that would have earned him a scolding on any other day. "They can't," James began, but Michael cut him off. "They can. They've been planning this since Dad—" He couldn't finish. Marcus Coleman had been silent during this exchange, but now he cleared his throat. "Pardon my intrusion into family business, but I may have a proposition for you, Mrs. Kendrick." Sarah met his steady gaze. "I'm not looking for charity, Mr. Coleman." "Good, because I'm not offering any." He pulled out a business card, setting it beside the eviction notice. "What I'm offering is a job. My stable manager retired last month, and I've got 40 horses needing someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who can see potential where others see problems." The hope that flared in her son's eyes almost broke Sarah's heart. She picked up the card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. "Your stables aren't exactly wheelchair accessible, I'd imagine." "They will be." Marcus stood, dropping cash on the table to cover their drinks. "Take a day to think about it. Call me if you're interested in seeing the place. Bring your boys. I've got some young stock that could use experienced hands." He paused, then added quietly, "Sometimes pride is expensive, Mrs. Kendrick, but so is regret." With that, he was gone, leaving them with 3 cooling hot chocolates and a business card that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in Sarah's hand. Marcus Coleman's business card sat on Sarah's nightstand for 3 days before she finally picked up the phone. She'd memorized every detail of the cream-colored cardstock, Coleman Ranch, where legacy meets future, followed by an address that promised a 2-hour drive north. The morning she called, her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice remained steady. The drive to Coleman Ranch tested both their old truck and Sarah's resolve. Michael handled the steering while James studied the increasingly rugged landscape through the passenger window. The ranch appeared gradually, first a well-maintained fence line, then scattered groups of horses grazing on rolling pastures that stretched toward distant mountains. "There must be at least 60 acres here," Michael murmured, his eyes tracking the property's boundaries. The main house came into view, a sprawling ranch-style structure that spoke of practical luxury rather than ostentation. But it was the stable complex that caught Sarah's attention. Even from a distance, she could see it was immaculately maintained, with broad aisleways and generous paddocks. Marcus Coleman waited for them by the main gate, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning sun. "You found us all right?" He opened the passenger door, helping Sarah transfer to her wheelchair with a matter-of-fact efficiency that surprised her. No awkward hovering, no excessive concern, just practical assistance offered and accepted. "The stables are this way," he said, falling into step beside her wheelchair while the boys followed. "I should warn you, they're a bit neglected. In terms of organization, my last manager was old school, good with horses, not so much with modern breeding programs or training schedules." The wide concrete paths were newly poured, Sarah noticed, smooth enough for her wheels to roll without catching. Too new to be coincidence. She glanced at Marcus, who met her gaze with a slight shrug. "I've been meaning to upgrade the facilities." "Anyway," he said simply. Inside, the stable was a curious mix of excellent care and administrative chaos. Proud horses peered from immaculate stalls, but the office was a jumble of outdated filing systems and handwritten notes. A half-dozen ranch hands moved purposefully through their morning routines, nodding respectfully as they passed. "Your reputation precedes you," Marcus commented as they reached the breeding barn. "Most of these folks have heard of your ghost dancer program. Tommy there," he nodded toward a weathered cowboy leading a spirited bay mare. "He tried to implement some of your methods with our problem cases." Sarah watched the man work, noting his gentle but uncertain handling. "He's got good instincts, but his timing's off on the release." "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell him," James burst out, then caught himself blushing. Marcus smiled. "Sounds like your boy has your eye for detail, Mrs. Kendrick." "Sarah," she corrected automatically, her attention caught by the bay mare's movement. That horse has potential. She's not fighting him. She's asking questions he isn't answering. Michael had drifted toward the office, his organized mind already cataloguing the chaos. These breeding records aren't digitized, he called out. And the filing system, he trailed off, looking embarrassed, is a mess, Marcus finished. Like I said, old school. We've got good stock, good people, but we're behind the times in terms of management. He turned to Sarah. That's where you'd come in. Full authority over training programs, breeding decisions, staff development, competitive salary, housing included. There's a renovated foreman's house near the main stable. 1 story, already. Modified for accessibility. Sarah's throat tightened. He'd planned this carefully, thought through every detail. Why me? She asked finally. There are plenty of experienced stable managers who don't come with complications. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching Tommy work with the bay mare. My wife was in a wheelchair the last 5 years of her life, he said finally. Cancer. She taught me that complications are just problems nobody's bothered to solve yet. He met Sarah's eyes. I don't want just a stable manager, Sarah. I want someone who can see potential where others see problems. Someone who can build something, lasting here. And our living situation, she pressed. The boys' schooling? The foreman's house has 3 bedrooms. Local school's small but good. Got a strong agriculture program. Town's 15 minutes away, he paused. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an investment in you, in your boys, in this ranch's future. Sarah wheeled herself to the bay mare's stall, feeling the animal's curious breath on her face. In the mare's eyes, she saw the same question she'd been asking herself. Can I trust this? Is this real? Mom, Michael said quietly, this could work. James had moved to stand beside his brother, both of them looking at her with a hope she hadn't seen since Thomas's death. Sarah reached out to stroke the mare's velvet nose, remembering Thomas's words about finding new ways to the same destination. Maybe this was their new way. Not a step down, but a step forward. When can we start? She asked, turning back to Marcus. His smile was warm but professional. How's Monday sound? The adaptive equipment catalogue lay open on Sarah's new desk, its pages filled with possibilities she'd never imagined existed. Marcus had handed it to her first thing Monday morning, along with a sticky note that read simply, "Circle what you need." The matter-of-fact support brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she quickly blinked away as hoofbeats approached the office door. Mrs. Kendrick? Tommy, the ranch hand she'd observed days earlier, stood awkwardly in the doorway. Got a situation with that bay mare, Magic. She's not letting anyone near her back left hoof. Sarah glanced at the clock. Barely 8 a.m. on her first day. Show me, she said, wheeling herself from behind the desk. The morning sun had barely crested the stable roof when they reached Magic's paddock. The mare paced nervously, favoring her left hind leg. 2 other ranch hands stood outside the fence, their body language broadcasting uncertainty. She's been difficult since that farrier visit last month, Tommy explained. Nearly kicked Bill here in the head yesterday. Sarah studied the mare's movement, noting the subtle signs of fear rather than aggression. Get me a bucket of sweet feed, she instructed, positioning her wheelchair by the gate. And someone bring me that mounting block from the arena. The ranch hands exchanged glances, but complied. Sarah could read their doubts as clearly as if they'd spoken them aloud. How was a woman in a wheelchair going to handle a horse that able-bodied cowboys couldn't manage? Once the mounting block was positioned, Sarah transferred herself onto it, now at perfect height, to work with the horse's feet. Tommy, bring her over, but do it the way I showed you last time. Release the pressure when she takes even a small step in the right direction. Magic's ears flicked forward with interest as Tommy approached with the feed bucket. Sarah waited, her hands relaxed in her lap, breathing slow and steady. The mare's approach was cautious but curious. That's it, girl, Sarah murmured. Nobody here is going to force you. Within 10 minutes, Magic was contentedly eating from The bucket, while Sarah ran gentle hands down her leg, finding the source of the mare's discomfort, a tiny piece of gravel wedged deep in her frog. "Bring me the hoof pick," she called softly, "and watch carefully, because this is where most people make their mistake. They think it's about strength. It's not. It's about timing and trust." As she worked, Sarah became aware of more ranch hands. Gathering to watch, she demonstrated how to hold the leg, how to read the horse's subtle signals, how to make the experience positive for both handler and horse. "There," she said finally, releasing the hoof. "Magic's gonna need some retraining around foot handling, but that's the immediate problem solved." She looked up to find Marcus leaning against the paddock fence, an approving smile on his weathered face. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of introductions and assessments. Sarah reviewed breeding records, training schedules, and health reports, her mind already organizing the chaos into manageable systems. Michael stopped by during his lunch break from school, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her surrounded by papers and purpose. "Need any help with those files?" he asked, already reaching for a stack. "Actually," Sarah smiled, "I could use your computer skills. These records need digitizing, and I remember someone telling me he's pretty good with databases." The afternoon brought its own challenges. A delivery truck driver's barely concealed skepticism when she signed for supplies. A ranch hand's instinctive step forward to take over when a yearling got fractious during grooming, only to stop short as Sarah handled the situation with quiet expertise. "You'll have to be patient with them," Marcus said later as the sun began. "It's descent behind the mountains. They're good people, but change takes time." Sarah watched through the window as James, who'd arrived after school, helped Tommy work with magic using her techniques. The boy's natural ability shone through in every movement, every quiet word to the horse. "I know about patience," she replied, "and about change." She gestured to the adaptive equipment catalog on her desk. "I've circled what I think we'll need to start. But I want to be clear, this isn't just about making accommodations for me. This is about modernizing the entire operation. Digital records, standardized training protocols, proper breeding documentation." Marcus picked up the catalog, studying her selections. "Anything else?" Sarah hesitated, then forged ahead. "Yes. I want to restart my Ghost Dancer program here. Modified, expanded. These horses have potential that's barely being tapped." "Funny," Marcus said, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "I was hoping you'd say that." He pulled an envelope from his pocket, sliding it across the desk. "Already filed. The trademark paperwork. Just needs your signature as program director." Sarah stared at the envelope, remembering the program she'd built from scratch, the one her in-laws had dismissed as impractical. Now here it was, being offered back to her like a lost piece of herself. "Welcome home, Sarah," Marcus said quietly, and walked out, leaving her to watch the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in colors that suddenly seemed fuller, richer than they had in months. The training schedule pinned to Sarah's office wall had become the ranch's beating heart. Color-coded blocks mapped out each horse's progression, each handler's assignments, and the complex dance of the breeding program. 3 months into her role, even the most skeptical ranch hands had come to rely on its clarity and purpose. "You've got magic penciled in for advanced groundwork this afternoon," Tommy said, studying the schedule during the morning meeting. He'd grown from an uncertain handler into one of her most dedicated students. "Think she's ready?" Sarah wheeled herself to the coffee maker, now perfectly positioned at wheelchair height. "She's been ready for a week. You're the one who needed the confidence." She handed him a steaming mug, her eyes twinkling. "And now you have it." The transformation of Coleman Ranch was happening in subtle ways. Digital records had replaced the chaotic paper files, thanks to Michael's after-school efforts. The breeding barn now ran with scientific precision. Each pairing carefully planned to strengthen bloodlines and temperament. Even the tack room had been reorganized with accessibility in mind, everything within Sarah's reach. James burst into the office, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, you need to see this. Starlight's foal is doing that thing you talked about, the one from your old program." Sarah followed him to the foaling barn, where a 3-week-old colt was demonstrating the natural handling response she'd documented years ago in her ghost dancer research. The sight made her throat tight. This was the first foal born under her new breeding program, carrying the genes she'd selected for trainability and intelligence. "Well, would you look at that?" Marcus's voice came from behind them. He'd taken to appearing quietly during these moments, his presence both professional and oddly comforting. "Seems your theories about behavioral inheritance are proving out." Sarah watched the colt investigate a new halter with careful curiosity, rather than fear. "It's early days yet, but yes, combined with the early handling protocols, we should see significant differences in trainability by weaning." "Dr. Anderson from the university called," Marcus mentioned casually. "He's interested in documenting your methods. Seems someone showed him your preliminary data." Sarah glanced at Michael, who suddenly became very interested in adjusting his bootlaces. Her eldest had been spending time in the ranch office after school, organizing her research notes alongside the breeding records. She'd noticed some papers missing, but hadn't said anything. "The vet program at CSU has an early admission track," Michael said quietly. "They like to see independent research experience." Pride and something else, a warm, expansive feeling, filled Sarah's chest. Her son wasn't just helping. He was building his own future, one careful step at a time. "Speaking of research," Marcus said, "that article you wrote about adaptive horsemanship is getting attention. 3 other ranchers have called asking about consultation visits." Sarah had written the article late at night, documenting the modifications she'd developed for working with horses from her wheelchair. She hadn't expected it to reach beyond their local circuit. "I'd need to train someone to cover the breeding program if I'm going to consult," she mused, watching James demonstrate her handling technique to a new ranch hand. Her younger son had inherited her gift for teaching, though he'd never admit it. "Already thought of that," Marcus replied. "Tommy is ready for more responsibility, and James has a better grasp of the program than most of our senior hands." Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah felt that now familiar flutter in her stomach. Marcus had a way of anticipating needs, hers, the ranch's, her boys, that reminded her of Thomas while being entirely his own. "Mom!" James called out. "Watch how he responds to the release cue." The moment passed, but its warmth lingered. Sarah moved closer to the round pen, noting how naturally James adjusted his position to keep both her and the horses in his sight line. He'd grown more confident these past months, finding his place in the ranch's rhythm just as she had. Later, that evening, reviewing the day's notes in her office, Sarah found herself opening the bottom drawer where she kept Thomas's old training journal. Its pages held the seeds of what would become the Ghost Dancer program, his neat handwriting filling the margins with encouragement and questions. "You were right, love," she whispered to the empty office. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you never knew you needed." A knock at her door drew her attention. Marcus stood there, holding 2 mugs of coffee and wearing an expression that made her heart skip. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting 1 mug on her desk. "It's getting late." Sarah smiled, closing the drawer gently. "Just finishing up the new training rotation." She gestured to the schedule on her wall. "Care to look it over?" He pulled up a chair, and together they bent over the schedule, their shoulders almost touching as they discussed the future of the ranch that had somehow become home. The blue ribbon from the Wyoming State Fair hung prominently in the ranch office, catching the early morning light. 6 months of careful preparation had led to this moment. Magic, the once troubled bay mare, had swept the competition in advanced performance classes. But it wasn't just the ribbon that made Sarah's heart swell. It was the photograph beside it, showing James standing proudly at Magic's head while Tommy held the trophy. "Your boy's got a gift," Marcus said from the doorway, startling Sarah from her reverie. "Both of them do in different ways." He wasn't wrong. While James had flourished in the training program, Michael had transformed the ranch's record-keeping system into a model of efficiency. His database now tracked everything from breeding outcomes to feed costs, earning attention from other prestigious ranches in the region. The university called again, Sarah mentioned, shuffling through her morning paperwork. They want to feature the Ghost Dancer program in their Equine Behavior Symposium next month. Marcus settled into what had become his usual chair near her. "Oh, desk, I saw the draft of your presentation. It's good, Sarah. Really good." She felt her cheeks warm at his praise, still unused to this easy support after years of fighting to prove herself. "It's one thing to succeed here with people who've grown to trust me. Speaking at the symposium means facing the wider industry. People who knew me before. You mean people like your former in-laws?" Marcus's voice was gentle but direct. "I heard they'll be there. The Kendricks rarely miss these events." Sarah's hands stilled on her paperwork. She'd been deliberately avoiding thoughts of that inevitable confrontation. "They'll have opinions about all this, I'm sure. Let them." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intent. "You've built something remarkable here, Sarah. The breeding program's success rates are unprecedented. We've got a waiting list for training spots. 3 different veterinary schools want to send students to study your methods." As if to underscore his point, the sound of hoofbeats and young voices drifted through the window. A group of local 4-H kids had arrived for their weekly lesson, another of Sarah's innovations. James and Tommy led these sessions together now, passing on the gentle handling techniques that had become Coleman Ranch's trademark. "Did you see Michael's college applications?" Sarah asked, changing the subject. "CSU's veterinary program is his first choice. His research work here, documenting the breeding program, it's given him a real shot. He's earned it." Marcus stood, moving to the window to watch the activity in the training ring. "Sarah, there's something else we need to discuss." Her heart skipped at his tone. They'd been dancing around something for months now, their professional partnership, warming into moments of shared coffee and lingering conversations. "The board of directors is meeting next week," he continued. "I'm proposing some changes to the ranch's ownership structure." Sarah wheeled herself to join him at the window. Below, James was demonstrating a complex ground exercise, his movements mirroring hers so perfectly it brought tears to her eyes. "What kind of changes?" she asked, though something in her already knew. "You've poured your heart and expertise into this place. The Ghost Dancer program alone has doubled our revenue. It's time that investment was recognized formally." He turned to face her. "I'm proposing to make you a full partner in Coleman Ranch." The world seemed to still. "Marcus, it's not charity," he said quickly, echoing his words from their first meeting. "It's good business, but—" He hesitated, then forged ahead. "It could be more than that, if you want it to be." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted. From the training ring, one of the 4-H horses had spooked, sending kids scrambling, but James and Tommy handled it smoothly, their teamwork a testament to months of training and trust. "Look at them," Marcus said softly. "That's what you've built. Here, not just a successful ranch, but a place where people grow, learn, become more than they thought they could be." He reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on her wheelchair's arm, myself included. The warmth of his touch sent memories of Thomas spinning through her mind, not with pain now, but with gratitude for what had been and hope for what could be. "The symposium," she said finally, turning her hand to clasp his. "Come with me? Not just as my business partner, but—" "Yes," he answered simply, and in that word she heard echoes of all the other questions they hadn't yet asked each other. Outside, James's voice rang clear and confident, teaching the next generation of handlers the principles she'd once thought lost. Michael's truck pulled up, returning from his morning college interview. The ranch hummed with purpose and possibility. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand, thinking of that first day in May's diner, when hope had seemed as distant as the Wyoming mountains. "Yes," she echoed, and this time it was an answer to all the unspoken questions between them. The anonymous letter arrived mixed in with the morning mail, unremarkable, except for the absence of a return address. Sarah might have overlooked it entirely, if not for the familiar weight of the expensive stationery, the same type her mother-in-law had always used for her social correspondence. "Bills, registration for the symposium and this," Michael said, dropping the mail on her desk before heading to his morning classes. He paused at the door, something in his mother's expression making him turn back. "Everything okay?" Sarah forced a smile. "Fine, sweetheart. Good luck on your biology test." She waited until his truck pulled away before opening the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. The message inside was brief, typed rather than handwritten, but its impact hit like a physical blow. The board of directors might be interested to know about the real circumstances of Thomas's death. How much oversight can someone provide from a wheelchair? Would they trust you with their prize horses if they knew the truth about that day? Consider carefully before accepting any changes to the ranch's ownership structure. The paper slipped from Sarah's numb fingers. Only a handful of people knew she'd been in the barn that morning, that she'd called out to Thomas when she saw him clutching his chest, that she'd tried to reach him, but her wheelchair had caught on an uneven board. A knock at the door made her jump. Marcus stood there, his expression shifting from warmth to concern as he read her face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" She couldn't speak, just gestured to the letter lying accusingly on her desk. Marcus read it, his weathered features hardening. "When did this arrive?" "Just now, with the regular mail." He studied the envelope, then the paper itself. "No prints besides yours and Michael's, I'm guessing. Professional printing. Expensive paper." His eyes met hers. "You recognize it?" "It's the same kind Catherine, my mother-in-law, always used." Sarah wheeled herself to the window, needing to see the familiar sight of the training rings, the horses moving in their morning routines. They never believed. After Thomas, she stopped, gathering herself. They blamed me for not reaching him in time. Marcus's hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and steady. "Tell me." The story spilled out. How she'd been checking the new foal that morning, how she'd heard Thomas's voice catching as he called her name. The terrible moment when she realized her wheelchair couldn't cross the rough flooring fast enough. How she'd tried to drag herself the last few feet. "The doctors said it wouldn't have mattered," she finished quietly. "The heart attack was too severe. But Catherine, she said, if I hadn't been playing at being useful in the barn, if I'd been in the house where I belonged." "Where you belonged," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "The way she figured you belonged when they tried to take the boys." Sarah wiped angrily at her eyes. "I've worked so hard to prove I can do this. The program's success, the breeding, records, the training innovations, it's all documented, quantifiable. And now, just before the symposium presentation, just before the board meeting," Marcus trailed off, his meaning clear. "They couldn't stand it when we were struggling," Sarah said bitterly. "But this, seeing us succeed, seeing the boys thrive, seeing me rebuild everything they tried to take," she gestured to the letter, "they'll try to poison it all." The sound of hooves on gravel announced James's arrival for his afternoon training sessions. Sarah watched her younger son dismount with fluid grace, saw how the horses turned to watch him, how the other handlers naturally oriented themselves around his quiet authority. "I won't let them hurt the boys again," she said firmly, "or damage the ranch's reputation. Maybe we should delay the partnership announcement, reconsider the symposium." "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "That's exactly what they want, to make you doubt yourself, to make you retreat." He picked up the letter, his jaw set. "You've built something extraordinary here, Sarah. Something that's helping people, changing lives. I won't let them take that from you. We'll fight this together." "Fight how? We can't prove who sent it." "No," he agreed, "but we can be ready for whatever comes next, because this," he held up the letter, "this is just the opening move." Sarah looked out at her son, now demonstrating a complex training sequence to a group of attentive handlers. She thought of Michael's college dreams, of the lives being transformed through her program, of the warm future beginning to unfold with Marcus. "Then we'll be ready," she said, steel entering her voice. "Whatever comes next." But as she watched, Marcus stride toward the security office, presumably to arrange for cameras and extra precautions. A cold knot formed in her stomach. She knew her in-laws, knew their patience and precision. This letter was indeed just the beginning, and somewhere in the gathering storm, she could hear Catherine Kendrick's elegant voice asking so reasonably, what kind of oversight can someone provide from a wheelchair? The security camera footage played on Marcus's laptop in grainy black and white, transforming the familiar office into a theater of shadows. Sarah watched, her hands gripping her wheelchair's arms as a figure moved through the pre-dawn darkness of the ranch office 3 days after the letter arrived. "Wait," she said suddenly. "Go back." Marcus rewound the footage. The figure paused at Sarah's desk, knowing exactly where to find her breeding program documentation. But it was the distinctive limp that made Sarah's breath catch, a legacy of an old riding accident. "David Carson," she whispered, "our head veterinarian." "Your former in-law's veterinarian," Marcus corrected grimly. "For 30 years, if I remember right." The betrayal stung deeper than Sarah had expected. David had been treating their horses since she and Thomas first started the business. He'd been there the day of her accident, had helped with her initial recovery. She'd trusted him to continue caring for Coleman Ranch's horses, never questioning his frequent visits or his interest in their breeding records. He's been feeding them information all along, she realized, the pieces falling into place. Every success, every innovation, they knew exactly what we were building here. A knock at the door interrupted them. Michael stood there, his face unusually grave. "Mom, Dr. Carson's here for the quarterly health checks. But there's something else you need to see." He handed her his tablet, open to an email from the symposium committee. Sarah read it twice, her vision blurring. The message was polite but clear. Concerns had been raised about the validity of her research data. Her presentation was being temporarily withdrawn from the program pending review. "They're not just trying to stop the partnership," she said quietly. "They're trying to discredit everything we've done here." Marcus's hand found her shoulder, squeezing gently. "Security footage proves he accessed private records without authorization. That's enough to terminate his contract immediately." "And then what?" Sarah wheeled herself to the window, watching David Carson's familiar figure moving between the stables. "He'll go straight to Catherine with whatever he's gathered. They'll twist everything, make it look like we've been falsifying data, cutting corners with horse care. Let them try." Michael's voice held a steel she'd never heard before. "I've documented everything. Every test result, every training milestone, every health record. Triple backed up with timestamps and verification codes." Sarah turned to stare at her son. He flushed, but stood straighter. I remembered how grandmother was, how she operated. So I made sure everything we did here was bulletproof." Pride warred with concern in Sarah's chest. Her boy had grown up too fast, learned too young to watch for threats in the shadows. "Michael." "No, Mom." He moved to stand beside her chair. "You protected us when they tried to take everything. Now it's our turn to protect what you've built." A commotion outside drew their attention. James was confronting David Carson near the breeding barn, his voice carrying through the window. "Saw you in Mom's office yesterday, before ours. Want to explain that?" Sarah's heart leaped to her throat, but before she could move, Marcus was already striding toward the door. "Stay here," he ordered. "Let me handle this." Through the window, she watched the scene unfold. Marcus's calm approach, David's defensive posture, the gathering of ranch hands drawn by the tension. When Marcus held up his phone, presumably showing the security footage, David's shoulders slumped. "He's calling the sheriff," Michael reported, watching through another window. "And is that James deleting something from Dr. Carson's phone?" Sarah wheeled herself rapidly toward the door, but Michael stepped in her path. "Mom, wait. Look." Out in the yard, James was indeed doing something with Carson's phone, his movements quick and purposeful. But it was the expression on David's face that caught Sarah's attention. Not anger or defiance, but shame. Marcus returned 10 minutes later, his face grim but satisfied. "Sheriff's on her way." James managed to get into Carson's phone. Seems he'd been recording conversations, photographing documents. All of it's been forwarded to our lawyers. "And?" Sarah pressed, knowing there had to be more. "And he talked." Broke down pretty quickly. "Actually," Marcus settled on the edge of her desk. "Catherine's been blackmailing him for years, something about covering up a mistake he made early in his career. She owned him, and he's been her eyes and ears in every major ranch in the county." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering all the times she'd confided in David, shared her hopes for the program, trusted him with their horse's care. "What do they want, really?" "Control," Michael said simply. "They couldn't control you after Dad died, couldn't make you fit their picture of what a grieving widow should be. And now you're successful, respected, rebuilding everything they tried to take." He trailed off, looking suddenly young and uncertain. "Now we fight back." Marcus finished. "But not their way. We do this in the open with truth and documentation. Let them try to discredit you at the symposium. We'll be ready." A knock at the door revealed Tommy, looking uncomfortable in his good clothes. "Sorry to interrupt, but that group from CSU is here early. The ones wanting to study the ghost. Dancer protocol? James has them in the conference room." Sarah straightened in her chair, drawing strength from the familiar weight of purpose. "Michael, get me the validation reports." "Marcus, right beside you," he said quietly. "Always." As they moved toward the conference room, Sarah caught a glimpse of David Carson being escorted to a patrol car, his head bowed. In the breeding barn beyond, she could see Magic's foal, living proof of her program's success, moving with the confident grace that had become the Coleman Ranch trademark. Let Catherine do her worst, Sarah thought. Some truths couldn't be twisted, some achievements couldn't be stolen, and some families were built stronger than blood. The legal documents spread across Sarah's desk, read like a calculated siege plan. Catherine Kendrick hadn't just been gathering ammunition through David Carson, she'd been laying groundwork for months, quietly acquiring shares in Coleman Ranch, through various shell companies, building toward the percentage needed for a hostile takeover. "They're claiming your disability makes you a liability," Marcus's lawyer explained, her finger tracking along a particularly dense paragraph. "They've documented every minor incident at the ranch since you started, trying to build a case that your oversight is inadequate. Minor incidents like the Miller boy falling off his pony." Sarah's voice was tight with anger. "The same fall that happened because he ignored James's safety instructions?" "Everything's been twisted," the lawyer confirmed. "They're presenting routine training accidents as evidence of negligence. They've even cited the time Michael called an ambulance for that ranch hand's allergic reaction as proof that medical emergencies are too common here. The emergency that Michael handled perfectly, following exactly the protocols I put in place." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "The one that had nothing to do with horses or training?" A knock at the door interrupted them. Tommy stood there, looking uncomfortable in clean jeans and a pressed shirt. Behind him, Sarah could see a cluster of ranch hands gathering in the outer office. "Sorry to interrupt, Ma'am, but we heard about the takeover attempt. The guys, we wanted you to know we're behind you, all of us." Sarah wheeled herself to the door, touched to see nearly every employee of Coleman Ranch crowded into the space. Some she'd trained personally, others had been skeptical of her methods at first, but had come around. All of them wore expressions of determined support. "They're saying we're unsafe," Tommy continued, his voice growing stronger, "that we need proper oversight. But I've worked at 5 different ranches, and I've never felt safer than I do here. Your protocols, your training, methods, they work, we all know it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathered workers. An older hand stepped forward, his weathered face serious. "My grandson's in your youth program, Mrs. Kendrick." born with cerebral palsy. Before your adaptive riding techniques, nobody would even let him near a horse. Now he's competing. You changed his life. More voices joined in, each with a story. Injuries prevented by her safety procedures, troubled horses transformed by her methods, lives touched by her willingness to see potential where others saw limitations. The lawyer watched this display with growing interest. Community testimony could be valuable if this goes to court, but they're pushing for an emergency board meeting next week before the symposium. They're hoping to force a vote before you can present your research. Then we'll be ready. Michael's voice came from behind the crowd, which parted to let him through. He carried a stack of folders and a laptop. I've been documenting everything. Every success, every safety record, every adaptation that improved our procedures. James appeared at his brother's side, adding his own files to the pile. The 4-H kids' parents are organizing too. They're writing letters about how the youth program has helped their children. And the local paper wants to do a story about our adaptive riding successes. Sarah felt Marcus's presence before she saw him, his quiet strength settling beside her wheelchair. The board members need to see this, he said, gesturing to the gathered workers, the documentation, the living proof of their success. Not just the paperwork and profit margins, but the real impact of what you've built here. They will, Sarah said firmly, an idea taking shape. Tommy, how many of our clients have horses in training right now? 23, ma'am, plus the therapy, program horses and the breeding stock. Call them, all of them. Invite them to the board meeting. She turned to the lawyer. They can't refuse to hear from paying clients, can they? Not if the clients insist, the lawyer said slowly, a smile spreading across her face. And definitely not if those clients a hint at taking their business elsewhere. Do it, Marcus nodded to Tommy, and contact the university research team. If Catherine Kendrick wants to talk about oversight and safety, let's show her exactly what professional oversight looks like. As the ranch hands dispersed, energized with purpose, Sarah found herself studying the photograph on her desk. It showed her sons at a recent horse show, flanking a young rider in a specialized saddle she'd helped design. The joy on the child's face, the pride in her boy's expressions. This was what Catherine had never understood. Success wasn't just about bloodlines and blue ribbons. It was about transformation, about opening doors that others thought forever closed. They're not just attacking you anymore, Marcus said quietly, following her gaze. They're threatening something bigger, something that matters to a lot of people. Sarah reached for his hand, drawing strength from its familiar warmth. Then we'll defend it, all of us, together. Outside, she could hear Tommy organizing phone lists, James explaining their needs to the research team, Michael compiling their documentation. The ranch hummed with renewed purpose, its community united against the threat to their shared vision. Catherine always did believe money and social position were all that mattered, Sarah mused. I wonder what she'll make of facing the actual heart of this place. Marcus squeezed her hand. I reckon we're about to find out. The old deed to the family cabin lay on Sarah's kitchen table, its edges worn soft with age. She'd retrieved it from the cabin that morning, needing to remind herself of where she'd come from, of the foundation that had supported her through every storm. Your father had this drawn up the day after we married, she explained to Michael and James, who sat across from her. He believed in having a backup plan, something that was ours alone. Michael picked up the deed, studying the familiar signature. That's why the Kendricks couldn't touch it when they took everything else. Exactly. Sarah smoothed her hand over the paper. And now it's going to help us one more time. James leaned forward, his expression puzzled. The cabin? How? Because... Marcus's voice came from the doorway. It proves your mother's business. Acumen long before she came to Coleman Ranch. He joined them at the table, setting down a fresh stack of documents. The cabin's value has tripled since she took ownership. She's maintained it, improved it, even leased the back acreage for grazing, all while managing her recovery and raising you boys alone. Sarah met his eyes, seeing the deeper meaning in his words. Every decision she'd made, every careful investment and improvement created a pattern of competence that Catherine Kendrick couldn't easily dismiss. There's more, Michael added, opening his laptop. I've been digging through Dad's old files. The Ghost Dancer program. Mom didn't just contribute to it. She was its primary architect. Dad's journals prove it. He documented everything, including how many of his supposed innovations actually came from Mom's observations and theories. Sarah felt tears threatening. Thomas had always given her equal credit, but seeing it there in his own handwriting meant for posterity, which makes the Kendricks' claims about your abilities even more ridiculous. Marcus continued, you weren't just supporting your husband's work. You were innovating, creating new methodologies that are still relevant today. A knock at the door interrupted them. Tommy entered, followed by Dr. Elena Rivera from the university research team. The scientist's eyes were bright with excitement. Mrs. Kendrick, we've finished our preliminary review of your current breeding program data. She spread charts across the table. The results are remarkable. Your adaptive handling techniques aren't just working, they're producing statistically significant improvements in early training outcomes. We'd like to expand the study, maybe even establish a permanent research partnership with Coleman Ranch. Sarah caught Marcus watching her, something soft and proud in his expression. But there was something else too, a decision forming behind his eyes. Actually, he said, I have another proposal to consider. He pulled a small box from his pocket, setting it beside the deed. I was going to wait until after the board meeting, do this properly. But seeing all this, your vision, your strength, the family and community you've built here, he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. Marry me, Sarah. Not for the ranch, not for the business, but because I love you and the extraordinary woman you are. The room went silent. Sarah stared at the ring, then at Marcus's face, seeing all their shared months of coffee and conversation, quiet support and growing trust, reflected in his eyes. Mom? James's voice was soft, encouraging. The timing, she hesitated, is perfect, Michael finished. Think about it. What better way to show the board and the Kendricks that this isn't just about business? This is family, this is real. Dr. Rivera cleared her throat. I should go. No, Sarah said suddenly, straightening in her wheelchair. Stay. In fact, she wheeled herself to the phone, hitting the intercom button that connected to the ranch office. Tommy, gather everyone, please. Main house, 15 minutes. She turned back to Marcus, who still waited patiently for her answer. You're right, this isn't just about business. What we've built here, all of us together, it's something Catherine never understood. Success isn't measured in dollars or bloodlines. It's measured in lives changed, in barriers broken, in families forged through choice rather than blood. She reached for the ring. Yes, Marcus, yes to partnership in every sense of the word. The next quarter hour was a blur of activity. Ranch hands, clients, research team members, and local supporters crowded into the main house's living room. Sarah looked around at the gathered faces, her sons flanking her proudly, Tommy trying not to cry, Dr. Rivera already planning how to incorporate this development into their presentation for the board. The Kendricks think they can break us by attacking our professional credentials, she announced. But they don't understand what they're really fighting. This isn't just a ranch or a business. It's a vision of what's possible when you see beyond. Limitations to potential. And now, she reached for Marcus's hand, now it's officially a family. The room erupted in cheers. Through the window, Sarah could see the horses in the evening pasture, Magic's foal leading the others in play. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, was right here. Let Catherine come with her lawyers and her threats. Some foundations couldn't be shaken because they were built on something stronger than fear or greed. They were built on love, on trust, and on the unshakable belief that sometimes life's hardest falls led to the most beautiful beginnings. The financial records lay neatly arranged on the table, before the board of directors, each page telling its part of Coleman Ranch's transformation. Sarah sat straight in her wheelchair, Marcus a steady presence beside her, as the regional horse show unfolded beyond the conference room windows. As you can see, Dr. Rivera was saying, the data is conclusive. Under Mrs. Kendrick's management, injury rates have dropped 60%, while training success rates have increased dramatically. The adaptive techniques she's developed aren't just accommodations, they're innovations that benefit all horses and handlers. A commotion outside drew attention to the warm-up ring, where James was preparing magic for her championship class. The mare moved with fluid grace, showcasing the gentle handling methods that had become Coleman Ranch's hallmark. Impressive statistics, Catherine Kendrick's voice cut through the presentation. She sat at the far end of the table, elegant as ever in her designer suit. But numbers can be manipulated. What concerns us is the inherent risk of having someone with limited mobility overseeing such dangerous animals. Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her, but she touched his hand gently. This was her fight. Limited mobility, she repeated thoughtfully. An interesting choice of words, Catherine. Would you like to see exactly how limited our program is? Without waiting for an answer, she wheeled to the window and pressed the intercom. James, it's time for the demonstration. The warm-up ring suddenly came alive with activity. One by one, riders entered, children from their adaptive riding program, each one showcasing a different specialized technique Sarah had developed. A young girl with cerebral palsy, seated in a custom saddle of Sarah's design. A veteran amputee, executing precise dressage movements. A boy with autism, performing complex groundwork patterns with absolute confidence. Every one of these riders was told they couldn't work with horses, Sarah said quietly. Every one of these adaptations was developed and tested here at Coleman Ranch. But perhaps you'd prefer to see our commercial success. She nodded to Michael, who opened the doors. Client after client entered. Prominent ranchers, professional trainers, even an Olympic equestrian coach. Each stepped forward to testify about the ranch's impact on their programs. Mrs. Kendrick's methods revolutionized our breeding program, the Olympic coach stated firmly. We've implemented her protocols across all our facilities. Catherine's composed facade cracked slightly. Anecdotal evidence doesn't. How about peer-reviewed research? Dr. Rivera interrupted, sliding fresh papers across the table. The university's preliminary findings have been accepted for publication. The Ghost Dancer program is being hailed as a breakthrough in equine behavioral science. And the financial implications? One of the board members leaned forward, studying the records. These profit margins are remarkable. They're also thoroughly documented, Marcus added. Every innovation, every adaptation, every success, and yes, every setback, all recorded and verified. Transparency has been a cornerstone of Sarah's management style. A burst of applause from outside drew everyone to the windows. Magic had just completed her championship pattern, with James handling her through a series of complex maneuvers that would have been impossible months ago. The mare's willing cooperation, her obvious trust in her young handler, spoke volumes about the program's effectiveness. There's something else you should know, Sarah said, turning back to the board. Something about the day Thomas died. Catherine's head snapped up, but Sarah continued steadily. I blame myself for years, believing I failed him because I couldn't reach him in time. But last week Michael found Thomas's last journal entry. She nodded to her son, who pulled out a familiar leather notebook. Dad wrote it that morning, Michael said, his voice clear and strong. Sarah's wheelchair isn't a limitation, he read. It's taught us all to think differently, to find better ways. Her insights have always been the heart of our program. I'm going to make it official today. Update all the paperwork to show she's been the real innovator all along. Sarah watched Catherine's face pale. He knew, didn't he? That's why you moved so quickly after his death, because he was finally going to give me proper credit for my contributions. You have no proof, Catherine began, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually," Marcus interrupted, "we do. David Carson gave us quite a detailed statement about your attempts to suppress evidence of Sarah's role in developing the original program. The sheriff found it very interesting." The board chairman cleared his throat. "I believe we've heard enough. Mrs. Kendrick, Catherine, your allegations of mismanagement appear to be thoroughly disproven. In fact," he turned to Sarah, "we'd like to discuss expanding your role here at Coleman Ranch. Perhaps some of your adaptive programs could be implemented at our other facilities." Outside, Magic was receiving her championship ribbon, James beaming with pride as he led her around the ring. Through the window, Sarah could see Tommy gathering the adaptive riding students for their group photo, each face shining with achievement. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, was crystallized in this moment. "I'd be happy to discuss expansion," she said firmly. "But first, I believe my fiancé has a proposal about restructuring ranch ownership that deserves your attention." Catherine stood abruptly, gathering her papers. "This isn't over." "Yes," Sarah said quietly, "it is. Because you never understood what Thomas did, that true strength isn't about power or control. It's about adaptation, innovation, and seeing potential where others see only limitations." As her former mother-in-law stalked out, Sarah felt Marcus's hand find hers. Through the window, she could see her sons, Michael documenting the championship, win for their records, James already preparing for his next class. The ranch hummed with purpose and possibility, its future stretching bright before them. Sometimes, she reflected, the hardest falls really did lead to the most beautiful beginnings. The partnership agreement sat before Sarah at the boardroom table, its crisp pages bearing witness to everything they'd fought for. Outside, the autumn sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple, while inside, the warmth of victory and vindication filled the air. "If you'll sign here," the corporate lawyer indicated, sliding the document toward her. "And Mr. Coleman here." She paused, smiling. "Though I understand that'll be changing soon as well." Sarah's hand was steady as she signed, years of practice making her wheelchair positioning automatic as she leaned forward. Marcus added his signature beside hers, his other hand resting supportively on her shoulder. "Congratulations, Ms. Kendrick, or should I say, co-owner and director of equine development for Coleman Ranch Enterprises?" The formal title brought an unexpected lump to Sarah's throat, not because of the position itself, but because of what it represented. Official recognition of everything she'd built here, everything she'd proven possible. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, pulling out another document. "I've had the ranch's name officially updated. From now on, we're the Coleman Kendrick Ranch and Adaptive Training Center." Sarah stared at him, touched beyond words. But before she could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention to the window. A truck was pulling up, hauling a familiar horse trailer, Catherine Kendrick's prized breeding stallion, led by none other than her head trainer. "Right on schedule," Marcus murmured, answering Sarah's questioning look. "Turns out quite a few of the Kendrick Ranch's clients were impressed by our demonstration at the show. They've decided to transfer their horses to our program." The trainer approached the office, head high, despite clearly being uncomfortable. Sarah wheeled herself to the door to meet him. "Mrs. Kendrick, Catherine, she doesn't know I'm here," he admitted. "But after seeing what you did with Magic, Champion's been struggling with some behavioral issues. We've tried everything traditional. I was hoping—" "Bring him to the evaluation paddock," Sarah said warmly. "James and Tommy will help you. Unload." As if summoned by their names, her son and the ranch hand appeared, moving with the quiet efficiency that had become their trademark. Sarah watched them guide the magnificent stallion toward the training area, where he would begin his journey of transformation. "You've built something remarkable here," the lawyer observed, gathering her papers. "Something that's going to change a lot of lives." "We've built it," Sarah corrected, reaching for Marcus's hand. "All of us together." Michael burst in, slightly out of breath. "Mom, the university called. They want to establish a permanent research partnership. They're talking about creating a scholarship program for students interested in adaptive training techniques." "Speaking of education," Marcus added, "didn't you have some news of your own?" Michael's face broke into a grin. "Early acceptance to CSU's veterinary program. They were particularly interested in my documentation of our breeding program's results." Sarah felt tears threatening again, but these were tears of joy and pride. Her son had found his path, one that would let him expand on everything they'd created here. "And James?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "Already in the ring with Champion," Michael laughed. "You know James never meets a horse. He doesn't want to understand." The phone rang. Another client calling about transferring their horses to the program. Sarah could see Tommy leading a tour group through the adaptive training facility, explaining the innovative equipment and techniques they'd developed. Dr. Rivera's research team was setting up cameras to document their methods for the upcoming training manual. "I never thought," Sarah began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the moment. "Never thought you'd be running the most innovative training facility in 3 states, Marcus suggested. "Never thought you'd revolutionize adaptive riding techniques. Never thought you'd find love again?" "Yes," she whispered, "to all of it." He knelt beside her wheelchair, taking both her hands in his. "You know what I never thought? That watching my wife's death would somehow lead me here, to someone who could teach me that limitations are just opportunities in disguise." Through the window, they could see James working with Champion, the stallion already responding to the quiet confidence of their methods. Michael was showing the research team through their meticulously organized records. The ranch hummed with purpose and possibility. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hands, remembering that first day in May's diner when hope had seemed as distant as the Wyoming mountains. Thomas used to say every great training breakthrough came from listening to what the horse was trying to tell you. Maybe life's the same way. Maybe all our struggles and losses were just life trying to lead us here. "To this ranch," Marcus asked softly. "To this family," Sarah corrected. "To this future we're building together." The autumn sun caught the diamond on her engagement ring, sending prisms dancing across the partnership agreement that had made their professional union official. Soon, another ceremony would unite them personally as well. But looking around at everything they'd built, the ranch, the program, the family they'd forged through choice rather than blood, Sarah knew the truest partnerships had already been formed, tested by adversity and strengthened by love. Champion's whinny of discovery echoed across the yard as he learned to trust in their gentle methods. It sounded like possibility. It sounded like hope. It sounded like home. The wedding invitation's elegant script caught the morning light as Sarah placed it carefully in her desk drawer. The celebration was planned for the spring, when the Wyoming wilderness would burst into bloom and their expanded adaptive riding arena would be complete. But it wasn't the invitation itself that gave her pause. It was the response card that had arrived that morning from Catherine and Richard Kendrick. "They're actually coming?" James asked from the doorway, his expression a mix of disbelief and concern. At 19 now, he'd grown into a remarkable young man, recently promoted to head trainer of their youth programs. "Your grandmother's pride was wounded, but she's not foolish," Sarah replied, wheeling herself to the window. Outside, a group of veterans was working with their therapy horses, their faces bright with the joy of newfound freedom. "She's seen what we've built here. More importantly, she's seen how many of her clients have transferred to our program." The ranch had flourished beyond their wildest expectations. The Coleman-Kendrick training methods were being studied at universities across the country. Their waiting list for both traditional and adaptive training stretched months long. Even Champion, Catherine's proud stallion, had become a testament to their success, now one of their most reliable therapy horses. "Michael's bringing his girlfriend to the wedding," James mentioned, changing the subject. "She's in the veterinary program with him at CSU. Apparently, she's fascinated by his research on genetic temperament markers in our breeding program." Sarah smiled, remembering how Thomas would have loved seeing his eldest son following this path. "And what about you? Is Emma coming?" James blushed. The young photographer had come to document their adaptive riding program for a magazine feature, and had stayed to capture much more. Her images of their work had helped spread the word about their methods across the country. A knock at the door interrupted his response. Marcus stood there, his face uncharacteristically serious. "Catherine's here. She's in the main office." Sarah felt her heart skip, but kept her voice steady. "Earlier than expected. James, would you check on the new client evaluations?" "Already on it." He squeezed her shoulder as he passed. A gesture. So like his father's, it made her throat tight. The drive to the main office was familiar now, the paths Marcus had paved smooth under her wheels. She found Catherine standing at the window, watching a young girl with leg braces working confidently with one of their trained horses. "That's Lisa," Sarah said quietly. 6 months ago, her parents were told she'd never ride. Now she's preparing for her first competition. Catherine turned, and Sarah was struck by how much older she looked. "I received your invitation," she said formally. "Richard and we would be honored to attend. But that's not why you're here today." Catherine's composure cracked slightly. "No, we've been approached by several prestigious breeding programs. They're all asking about your methods, your adaptive techniques. Even facilities in Europe are interested. And you're wondering if we'd consider a collaboration?" Sarah kept her voice neutral, though her heart was racing. "A partnership," Catherine corrected. "The Kendrick bloodlines combined with your innovative training methods." She paused. "We were wrong, Sarah, about so many things. What you've built here, it's extraordinary." Sarah studied her former mother-in-law, seeing past the designer clothes to the tired woman beneath. "Thomas would have loved this place," she said gently. "Not just the success, but the purpose. The way it helps people find their strength." "Yes," Catherine whispered, "he would have." She straightened, visibly gathering herself. "The partnership offer is genuine. Take time to consider it. Discuss it with Marcus and your family." The word choice wasn't lost on Sarah. "I will." "And Catherine, thank you for coming in person." As her former mother-in-law left, Sarah wheeled herself to the window, watching Lisa execute a perfect pattern with her horse. Marcus appeared beside her, his presence as reassuring as always. "You okay?" "Better than okay," she replied, reaching for his hand. "I was just thinking about something Thomas used to say about horses, how sometimes the most resistant ones become your best teachers if you're patient enough to wait for them to find their way." Through the window, they could see Catherine, pausing to watch Lisa ride, something soft and wondering, crossing her face as the girl demonstrated one of Sarah's specialized techniques. "Life has a way of bringing things full circle," Marcus observed. "Speaking of which," he handed her an envelope. "The contractor's final plans for the wedding venue, the accessible design you suggested. They want to use it as a model for other facilities." Sarah smiled, thinking of all the circles closing, all the new ones beginning. Outside, James was introducing Emma to Catherine, the young photographer's camera catching the late afternoon light on the mountains. Michael's latest research results lay on her desk, promising breakthroughs in understanding horse behavior. And everywhere she looked, their expanded family of staff, clients, and students moved with purpose and joy. Full circle, she agreed, but always moving forward. The family portrait hung in the ranch's main hall, capturing a moment from Sarah and Marcus's wedding day. Sarah in her wheelchair, radiant in ivory lace, Marcus standing proud beside her, Michael and James flanking them, both in suits that couldn't quite hide their everyday comfort with ranch work. But it was the background that truly told their story. The adaptive riding arena filled with their extended family of staff, students, and supporters. 1 year later, Sarah paused beneath that portrait, adjusting her blazer before heading to the conference room. The Coleman Kendrick Ranch was hosting its first international symposium on adaptive riding techniques, and facilities from 3 continents had sent representatives. "Ready?" Marcus appeared beside her, silver touching his temples in a way that only made him more handsome. The European delegation just arrived. Almost, waiting for... She broke off as Michael hurried in, his veterinary residency badge still clipped to his jacket. "Sorry I'm late. Had to finish rounds at the clinic." He kissed her cheek. "The new therapy wing is officially approved. We'll be able to combine veterinary care with adaptive training starting next month." The clinic had been Michael's vision, a fusion of traditional veterinary medicine with their innovative training methods. At 24, he was already making waves in the field, his research papers on behavioral genetics drawing international attention. "James called," Michael added. "He's finishing up at the Kentucky facility, then he and Emma are flying back. Tomorrow, said the new trainers are fully certified in our methods." Their younger son had taken their training program on the road, establishing satellite facilities across the country. Emma traveled with him, documenting their success stories through her lens. Her photographs of transformed lives and triumphant spirits had become the face of their program worldwide. "Mrs. Coleman Kendrick," Tommy appeared in the doorway. "Now, their operations director. The Kendrick Ranch representatives are here with those new breeding contracts." The collaboration with Catherine had evolved into something none of them had expected. Rather than a mere business partnership, it had become a chance for healing. Catherine had thrown herself into understanding their methods, her expertise in bloodlines, complementing Sarah's innovative training techniques. "Think about it," Marcus said softly as they made their way to the meeting. "A year ago we were fighting to save what we had. Now we're expanding across continents." Sarah nodded, remembering those tense days. It was never just about saving the ranch, was it? It was about proving that limitations are just opportunities waiting to be discovered. The conference room was packed with faces from around the world, all eager to learn their methods. Through the window, Sarah could see Lisa, now their youngest instructor, teaching a group of new adaptive riding students. The girl who'd been told she'd never ride was now helping others break through their own perceived limitations. "Before we begin," Sarah addressed the room, "I'd like you to look out those windows. What you see isn't just a riding program. It's proof that when we adapt, when we innovate, when we believe in potential rather than focusing on limitations, we create ripples that change lives far beyond our own arena." She felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder, saw Michael's proud smile, thought of James spreading their methods across the country. She remembered Thomas's faith in her, the strength she'd found in her darkest moments, and all the lives transformed because she'd refused to let adversity define her. "Welcome," she continued, "to the future of adaptive training. We're here, not just to teach riding, but to show the world that every barrier can become a gateway, every challenge an opportunity, and every ending the beginning of something even more beautiful." Outside, the Wyoming wind danced across the arena, carrying the sound of hoofbeats and laughter, of dreams taking flight and spirits soaring free. The ranch that had begun as one woman's refusal to be limited by circumstance had become a beacon of hope and transformation for people around the world. And Sarah, looking out at the life she'd built with her new family, knew that some falls really did lead you exactly where you were meant to be. The ranch expansion plans spread across Sarah's desk, told a story of dreams growing beyond anything she'd imagined 2 years ago. The original adaptive riding arena now anchored a comprehensive training complex that drew students and professionals from across the country. But it was the letter beside the plans that brought tears to her eyes, an official designation making Coleman Kendrick Ranch the regional center of excellence for adaptive training and therapeutic riding. "Mom?" Michael's voice carried through her office intercom. "The new vet students are here for orientation, and you might want to come see this." Sarah wheeled herself out to the main courtyard, now a hub of constant activity. A group of veterinary students clustered around Michael, but it was the familiar face among them that made her pause. Lisa, the young rider who'd once been told she'd never ride, now pursuing her dream of becoming an adaptive sports veterinarian. She's already been accepted for her internship here next year, Michael said proudly as Sarah approached. Says she wants to specialize in adaptive equipment design and therapeutic animal care. The ranch had evolved into a true teaching facility. Michael's veterinary internship program had become highly competitive, combining traditional medicine with their innovative approach to adaptive techniques. His research partnership with CSU had expanded to include 3 other universities, all studying the long-term benefits of their methods. Dr. Kendrick? One of the students raised her hand, and Sarah felt that familiar warmth at hearing Michael addressed by his professional title. Could you explain how you developed the genetic markers for temperament selection? As Michael launched into an explanation of their breeding program, Sarah's attention was drawn to the adjacent training ring. James was there, recently returned, from establishing their newest satellite facility, working with a group of international trainers. Emma moved around the arena's edge, her camera capturing the moments of breakthrough and connection that had become their program's hallmark. Quite a change from the early days, Marcus said softly, appearing beside her. He'd developed an almost magical ability to know when she needed him near. Remember when we thought success meant just keeping the ranch running? Sarah smiled, reaching for his hand. Now look at us, Regional Training Center Research Facility, International Certification Program. And this is just the beginning, he replied, nodding toward another group, approaching the office. The Paralympic Committee representatives are here to discuss using our facility as a training center. The potential partnership with the Paralympic equestrian team was exciting, but it was just one of many new developments. Their adaptive equipment designs, developed through years of practical experience, were being manufactured for facilities worldwide. The training manual Sarah had written was being translated into 12 languages. James's youth program has a waiting list 3 years long, Marcus continued, and Tommy's instructor certification course is being adopted as the industry standard. They watched as Tommy led a group of certification candidates through their paces. The former ranch hand had grown into a masterful teacher, his natural ability enhanced by years of working with their methods. Under his guidance, the instructor training program had become as prestigious as their riding programs. A commotion at the main gate drew their attention. Catherine Kendrick's car was pulling in, right on schedule for their weekly breeding program meeting. The sight no longer brought tension. Time and shared purpose had transformed their relationship into a genuine collaboration. She's bringing the paperwork for the foundation, Marcus mentioned. The scholarship program for adaptive sports education is ready to launch. The foundation had been Catherine's idea, a way to ensure that financial constraints never prevented anyone from accessing their programs. It was funded jointly by both ranches, a symbol of how far they'd all come from the days of bitter conflict. "Mom!" James called out, jogging over from the training ring. "You need to see this. Remember that technique we developed for riders with visual impairments? The International Federation wants to make it part of their standard protocol." Sarah felt Marcus squeeze her hand, sharing her pride. Their son had taken their methods and expanded them in ways they'd never imagined. His intuitive understanding of horses combining with a deep empathy for his students' needs. "And the university called," James added, almost as an afterthought. "They want you to give the keynote at the International Therapeutic Riding Congress. Something about revolutionizing adaptive sports through innovative methodology." Sarah looked around at the busy facility. Michael teaching his students, James developing new techniques, Tommy certifying instructors, Emma documenting it all. Every corner of the ranch hummed with purpose and possibility. "You know what Thomas would say about all this?" she mused, thinking of her late husband's favorite saying about finding new ways to old destinations. "He'd say you did exactly what you were meant to do," Marcus answered. "You took a fall and turned it into flight, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes here looking for their own wings." Above them, the Wyoming wind danced across the mountains, carrying the sound of hoofbeats and hope toward new horizons. The Christmas card photograph captured everything the Coleman Kendrick Ranch had become over the past 5 years. Sarah and Marcus stood at the center, her in her wheelchair, him with his hand resting easily on her shoulder. Michael and his wife Claire, both in their veterinary coats, stood to one side with their newborn daughter, while James and Emma balanced on the other, their wedding rings still new and shining. Around them gathered their extended family of staff, students, and supporters, all posed before the ranch's newest addition, the Sarah Kendrick Center for Adaptive Sports Innovation. "Perfect timing," Sarah said, setting the stack of cards aside as she heard familiar footsteps. "I was just thinking about you." Marcus entered their home office, snow dusting his shoulders. "Remembering when all this started? Hard not to. Today of all days." She wheeled herself to the window, watching a new rider take her first independent steps after dismounting, supported by one of their specialized walking frames. "5 years ago, I thought losing the old ranch was the end of everything." The view before them told a different story. The original adaptive riding arena had spawned an entire complex dedicated to transforming lives through innovative adaptive sports techniques. Their methods had spread worldwide, their training programs becoming the gold standard in adaptive riding. "Grandma!" The delighted squeal came from little Grace, Michael and Claire's daughter, as she toddled into the office. At 18 months, she was already showing signs of inheriting both her parents' love for animals and her grandmother's determination. "There's my girl," Sarah laughed, scooping her granddaughter into her lap. "Ready to see the new foals." The breeding program, now a collaboration between their ranch and the Kendricks, had produced remarkable results. Their focus on temperament and trainability had created a new line of horses, especially suited for therapeutic work, while maintaining the athletic excellence the Kendrick bloodlines were known for. "Michael's in the clinic," Marcus reported, lifting Grace to his shoulders. "That new procedure he developed for helping injured therapy horses? The International Veterinary Journal is publishing his research next month." Their eldest had exceeded everyone's expectations, combining veterinary expertise with adaptive sports medicine to create innovative rehabilitation techniques. The clinic he ran with Claire had become a beacon for others in the field, drawing veterinarians from around the world to study their methods. "And James called," Marcus continued. "The Olympic Committee is officially adopting our training protocols for their Paralympic program. Emma's doing a special photo series about it, following riders from their first lesson here to their Olympic debuts." Sarah smiled, remembering her younger son's journey from uncertain teenager to internationally respected trainer. His gift for understanding both horses and humans had helped countless riders find their strength, while Emma's photography continued to tell their stories to the world. A knock at the door revealed Tommy, now their global training director. "Sorry to interrupt, but you'll want to see this, Mrs. C." They followed him to the main arena, where a scene unfolded that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Lisa, the girl who'd been told she'd never ride, now a newly graduated veterinarian, was helping a young rider master the same technique that had changed her own life years ago. "Full circle," Sarah whispered, feeling Marcus's hand squeeze her shoulder. "Mom!" Michael emerged from the clinic, his face bright with excitement. "You won't believe the latest research results. The neural plasticity studies on our adaptive riding techniques, they're showing benefits we never even imagined." Before she could respond, James's voice called out from the entrance. He and Emma were just returning from their latest training center launch, their faces wind-burned and happy. "The European Center is officially open," he announced. "And you'll never guess who's running it. Remember that skeptical trainer from Catherine's old staff? The one who brought Champion to us? He's completely converted to our methods." Sarah looked around at her gathered family, both blood and chosen. Michael discussing research with Claire, while Grace played at their feet. James and Emma sharing photographs of their latest success stories, Tommy directing new instructors with quiet confidence, and Marcus always beside her, his love and support as steady as the Wyoming mountains. "You know what Thomas used to say about legacy?" she said softly, watching another new rider discover their strength through their program. "He said it wasn't about leaving something for people, it was about leaving something in them." "I'd say you've managed both," Marcus replied, gesturing to the thriving facility around them. Sarah reached for his hand, thinking of that long-ago day when she'd thought her wheelchair meant the end of her dreams. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far greater than she'd ever imagined, a legacy of hope, innovation, and transformation that would continue changing lives long after they were gone. Through the window, the winter sun caught the engraved words above the center's entrance. "Every fall is a chance to fly." Below it, riders of all abilities moved together in the arena, each one proving that limitations were truly just opportunities, waiting to be discovered. And in that moment, Sarah knew that some stories didn't just end, they rippled outward, touching life after life, creating endless new beginnings from what once had seemed an ending.